Going to be a little talk about winter sowing. The garden's coming to an end this year. This kind of will extend your gardening season into the winter and into the spring. So the idea behind this is that this is a milk jug. It's also going to become a little greenhouse. So you can use this. You can use pop bottles. I've used down to like the 20-ounce ones. And I've used up to the 2-liter ones. Those work real well. And then I've even used little containers like this, this is for muffins or something. And the idea then is to get that together for yourself, collect them, like start now and just kind of use them up. The idea behind winter sowing is that you're mimicking what Mother Nature does, and you're speeding it up a little bit by using the greenhouse thing here. You can scatter these, for instance, these California poppy seeds. You can put them out in the winter and they'll come up, or you can put them in a jug and they're kind of controlled more where you're going to put them than later on. But this works very best. It works for is for things that need to be called stratification, where you need cold before the seed will germinate when it gets warmer out. So most of your perennials that you would grow for your flower garden, perennial gardens, need stratification to some degree. When you put them in the jug, put them out in the winter, you're doing that naturally in the little container. The first step is planning. What you want to do is plan your garden for next year, what you want to grow. I've used in the past for my vegetable garden out here, there's a plan like this. There's a online site called rhshumway.com. They're a seed company, but they also have what's called a garden planner. It's a computer program for planning your garden. You can lay out where you want everything. It spaces everything out for you. It tells you how many plants of a certain type you need. So like this one says I needed like 52 tomato plants to do 2 rows of tomatoes. So I know I need 52. I don't need 152, but I need around 50. And so that's a good source if you want to go on there. You can get their website allows you, I think, a 7 to 10 day free trial, and then after that it's like $29 a year to keep the planner. But to do your initial plan for your vegetable garden out here, 7 days is plenty. You can put together what you need.
How do you spell that?
It's R.H. Shumway, SHUMWAY.com.
Thank you.
And there's other ones out there. There's other garden planners. You can go Google and whatever, but I know that one gives you a 7 day free trial at least before you have to sign up. But it gives you an idea how many plants for your veggies you need. You can also do it for your perennial garden or whatever you want. It has a huge database for all of your different plants and what size they're going to be and how much space they'll take up and how many plants you need. So once you know kind of idea what you want to grow, I start out like usually you want to start these after the winter solstice, so like after Christmas. And then I usually wait till after the holidays, so like the second week of January you can start putting these together. And now the process. So you've got a jug like this. You can use various tools. You need to put drainage holes in the bottom. It's probably the second most important part about this whole thing is having enough drainage, because they're going to be sitting outside in the cold, in the snow, in the rain, and it needs to drain out. So not only do you need to put drainage holes in the bottom, you need to put some up the side, because when this sits outside and the snow gets yay high and it freezes, there's nowhere for the water to go unless you have something on the side to let the water out. Otherwise they'll drown. The tools to use for that, I found that this is the best tool, my kid's old wood burning kit. And you just plug that in and you just pop the hole, and it works great. If you don't have one of those, if you have a gas stove, you can use a Phillips screwdriver and just put this on the stove, heat it up, and then just poke your holes until it gets cold, and then you heat it back up again. And then the other one is your drill. And the problem I found with this is it leaves little plastic pieces everywhere. And the battery's dying, so.
So does it, how big, the hole has to be about a quarter inch?
About a quarter inch. This is like a 5/16 drill, so that'll work too.
And about how many holes do you put in the bottom of the drill?
I'll show you in 1 second.
Sturdy plastic.
Well, that's the thickest part. So like on a pop bottle, it's got these little lobes. So you kind of put one in each hole of the bottom of the lobe. And then one above this lobe here. Most of your plastic bottles have a little lip where they're designed that way. So that kind of gives you a measuring stick where you want that. Put one there, and I'll put one here. And you just go around and do that. So you'll have maybe a dozen holes or so in the bottom of the pop bottle. You'll have about a dozen or so holes in this has like lobes, so I put 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 on the lobes of the bottom of your milk jug, and then like 3 on each side. That's enough. You can put more. Less is probably not a good idea because you do want a lot of drainage. So
Half inch, an inch on how far on the milk jug?
the milk jug has this little line here.
Okay.
They all have that, so you want to put one up to like about that high, and then a couple up below that. So they all have the little lines. So that gives you a good indicator. I've also got a jug here from vinegar jug from canning. Once you get that done, then the next step is to cut it in half. Your milk jugs have your handle here. That's going to become a hinge. So you want to start like yo. And this doesn't got to be perfect. You can draw a line if you want, but I just now you have it. You have this. It's not going to flop apart. The hinge is important so you can open it up, put your potting soil in there, and go from there. This little top thing here on all your jugs, this is rubbish. You don't want to keep the cap on. Nothing will grow. It'll just suffocate in there. So you got to get rid of that. That's rubbish. Then I usually do this in my my kitchen sink because it has the little spray nozzle, which is a great watering tool. This will be my sink for now. And you use potting soil. You don't want to use garden soil. Your garden soil. You don't want to use homemade compost because that'll bring up volunteers you don't necessarily want. The potting soil you buy in the store is generally sterilized, so it's not going to have other have any weeds or fungus and stuff in there. It's all been processed. So you go about, see that most of the way up, about 3 inches of soil you want in the bottom of your jug. So that's about the perfect depth. And then you soak it real good. Until the water drips out like that. And another great tool I found is a chopstick. Chopstick's great. You put your holes in here how you want them, space them apart. I'm going to do this one as a squash. So you plant this pretty much the same as you would plant a hill for your squash or your cucumbers or any of your cubic plants. And you just put them in here. You got your holes. And we'll put, there's like 8 in there, which is about what I usually put in a hill. You can thin them out later. And then you just cover them up. You also don't want to use this for your main thing. This is seed starting mix. Seed starting mix has like no nutrients in it. It's just, this is just coconut chore and some vermiculite or perlite, one of the two. And so there's not much to it, but I do use this just to cover the seeds up. And this works really good with the really small seeds. You can just cover just dusting with this stuff. And since I have it, I use it. So if I don't have it, you don't need it. You can just use regular potting soil. And then you give it one more water. And you let it sit for a little bit. And you water the plants here. Once you're done with that, you're pretty much almost done. Close this back up. And if you can't fix it with duct tape, you can't fix anything. Duct tape I find works the well. You can use packing tape, or some people just drill holes in here and use a twist tie or whatever you want to use to do that, to keep it shut. And it doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be sealed 100%, but most of the way.
Yeah, you could like drill a hole and top and bottom and just throw
Right.
a twist tie or
Twist
something.
tie or a pipe cleaner or something like that.
I used a hole
Or-
punch,
or
the
a
ones I did in the spring.
Yeah.
A hole punch, okay.
Hole punch or a twist tie. You can use zip ties, whatever you want to use. But the cheapest and easiest way is with this. You line that back up and you just,
So you're saying you don't actually have to close it up if it's going to be like in the winter and snow?
well, this is as closed up as you need it.
Yeah.
You know what
And it don't, it's a good idea to dry it off before you do it, because this is cheap duct tape, but then you're done, almost. You do want to mark what it is, because you want, this is the best tool for that. This is a paint pen. If you use a Sharpie in the sun, it'll fade, and you'll lose what, it'll disappear on you. Swear to God, I've learned that the hard way. You put,
Yeah,
I learned it this year, yeah.
now you might know it's a tomato plant, but you don't know what variety
What
it
if
is.
you put a stick inside?
You can do that. I've got, you can put a, something in there, or a little label. You can stick that inside. But if it's inside, you can't read it. When it's outside,
Right.
you don't know what's in there. So I use,
Where do you find paint sticks?
most hardware stores have these. These are about $3, $4, maybe if you pay full retail for them. You can find, my son's company makes these, so I get them.
So you buy them in gross.
Well, he gives me a handful every now and then, the defective ones.
I saw a tip on Pinterest, because I've been reading up on this, to just number your jug
Yeah, you can do that.
and then keep
Keep a record, but then you got to remember where the record is.
You keep talking there, you go, Jim. I like this. Keep
That's
talking.
like-
A man after my own heart, yes sirree. Find that piece of paper. That scrap you wrote it on. That was my garlic problem this year. I marked them and everything. I still don't know what I have at home.
So, once you got that on there, this is white, but you can still read it. It does not go away. This will last years.
I'll have to look at that one.
You can see from this one here, this is like 3-year-old jar. It's still on there. So it's the best method for doing that. I've used the Sharpies. If you do use a Sharpie, also write on the bottom, because the sun won't get to it, and you'll be able to at least look under and see what it is. And that's pretty much the process for that. I have a, can go on, there's another website you can look up. It's called wintersowing.org. And there's a lady named Trudy Davidson, I think her last name, or Davison, and that's her website. She's the one that's basically started this whole idea, or at least brought it to the forefront of to gardeners. And they have a listing on there, many of the things you can grow. It has, this one is the perennials for winter sowing, and then there's another listing for vegetables and herbs that you can grow, start. And then annuals. There's a few other ones on there, some oddball stuff, but these are the majority of them. So it gives you, if you're not sure if you can grow something, this at least gives you an idea. If it's not on this list, you probably still can do it. What you can't grow are anything that is a tropical plant. It won't work because it's too cold. They're not used to that. But anything that's subtropic you can do. You can even do things like eggplant and peppers, which can struggle to some degree in our area here because it doesn't really get warm enough until like end of April, early May, so you're going to get a late start, but it'll still work. So you might want to plant them in end of March instead of in January. But I've planted peppers in January; they still come up. The plants know. I do tomatoes. I start them even in January because I don't think you can kill a tomato seed. You got all the volunteers that come up out here in the garden. They've been sitting out there all winter long, and then they come up, so they know when to go. The idea behind this is then when the sun hits this, and it's like say 45 degrees outside. It's about 65 degrees to 55 to 65 degrees in this jar if it's in the sun. So what I do then is I take these and I'll put them out on my back driveway. You have a windy condition like that. I'll use something like, these work really good. This is one of your coats you get at, put your Christmas ornaments in or whatever. You can pick them up for a few dollars. You drill holes in the bottom so the water can get out. Put that in your backyard and you plop that in there, and you can do like, you get like 6 in here or more depending on how big your bottles are, and then they won't blow away or blow over. I've never had a problem with anything blowing over really. Some of the small ones you group together outside, and you group these together, block them around. Even if you don't have the bucket, you can group them around the bigger ones and they won't blow away. And so anyhow, this will sit out here until like, then they'll start to sprout usually between in March to end of March till May, depends on what they are. You keep an eye on them and go from there. I've had the problem, one of the problems you can run into in Cleveland is that the weather will get funny in, of course, April and May. Like this year we had a stint in early April where it got very warm. A lot of things sprouted. Then we had about a week of really cold, gray days, like into the 30s. And the plants that have sprouted, if there's sun around, they'll be all right. If it's gray and dreary and you get 3 or 4 days of like 30-degree weather, they will die. Some of them will die anyhow. So you can take them in, put them in your garage or cover them with a cloth or something for those days. You got to kind of watch it, see how many you got sprouted, and cover those. If they haven't sprouted yet, they're fine. But once they sprout, if you get that long period of cold, it's just too cold even for the greenhouse because there's no sun to keep them warm. And then we had another period like that in May when it got really cold for early May, where it got very cold for 4 or 5 days and it was gray, and I covered mine again and then they were all right. Or you can stick them in one of those little greenhouses that I've got at home, the little, you pick them up at Aldi's or something, little plastic greenhouse, temporary ones, and then they'll be fine in there. So because they're covered and they're all right. And that's kind of about it. Another thing you can do, not quite it, but I've grown plants right in the pot. So on this one I planted these, and then like the winter sowing, only, and I covered this with saran wrap, just clear plastic, poked holes in that, wrapped it around, put the duct tape around it so you have a little greenhouse. Once they pop up, you take the plastic off. Once they get to the height where they got to be, they get to the top, and then I take the top off, and it's permanently in here, so you don't even have to transplant or anything. There's a question before how you make these so you don't disturb the seeds or disturb the roots so much. So when you have a jug like this, I'll do it here. So this has got squash in it. So these will grow up, they'll pop out. You can take it around April, when you're past most of the frost dates, you take the tape off, pop them open. If it's going to be really cold out, you can close them back up, or put them in a little greenhouse or in a house or whatever. But as long as they're no frost around, they're okay to be open. When you go to plant this, you'll take this and you slit the jug like here and here, maybe 3 sides. Just run a knife down and open it up, and then you got your hill or swale, whatever you're going to plant this in. You put your compost in the bottom, and you dig the hole, and you go down about 3 inches, and you just slide this. Get your hand in there and just slide it right into the hill, and you're not disturbing the roots hardly at all. Pops it right in there, and you just pat it in, and you're ready to go because plants are all done. Some other things I've done is I do a lot of lettuce this way. They come up, and in the early spring, once they're little tiny seedlings, I'll open it up and I'll prick them out and I'll put them into the module trays that you get in the nurseries, whatever, and then I'll just put one plant in each of the little things, and they're pretty cold hardy, so they're okay until we get out to the garden here and you can plant them in that way. So then they're individual plants as opposed to big glob of plants. If you're doing something like the poppies, they'll come up like a big green mass, because you'll have like hundreds of those seeds are like powder. So you'll have hundreds of plants in that little jug, and you cut it like brownies, like little. You just slit it like a cake, and you pull out each little plug, and you can plant them into your garden, and then they'll take off, and then you can thin them out at that point if you want to thin them out some more. But that's the way to do that, because usually poppies don't like to be transplanted, but if you catch them when they're very small, it's not a problem. But if you let them get too big and you transplant them, they will die, or they won't do well. So, any questions?
You can start sunflowers in there?
Sunflowers aren't a good idea.
Not?
Yeah, there's certain things that are not a good idea. We'll go over a few of those. Radishes are kind of a waste. Sunflowers are not good because they don't transplant well at all. Okay. You're better off just planting them in the
direct seed.
Direct seed those in. Carrots are not a good idea if they don't transplant well. Parsnips are not good. But most other things, and some of those things I don't think are really good are on this list, but most of them on here are right. Because this is a list for the whole country, and it varies from place to place. Yeah. I've done nasturtiums, and they do a little better in this way than they do if you plant them by just direct sow them, but it's no matter how much work you want to do. So, corn is also not a good idea to do in this because it doesn't transplant well at all. It'll stun out on you, and it'll never do. It'll get like this high and then die. So it's not good. So, but most things are fine. This is a salvia, blue salvia. It's getting ready to bloom, but I planted this last winter, probably in January. So this is an idea how they'll do. So.
And this whole setup is to set out in January. mid-January.
Well, you can start, and what I do is like when I was working, I would do on the weekends. I get 4 or 5 jugs, and on a Saturday night or Sunday night or something, I'd sit there and I'd prep them all, and I'd do 4, and I'd drop them out in the middle of the winter out in the backyard, and I ended up with usually end up about 80 jugs or something like that. So you're doing 4 or 5 a week, and then you can just keep going until end of March. You can keep putting things out, and they'll keep, you just add things as you go. You can get another good tip is to get seeds. You can get them, of course, here they're free, but you also can you go to the Dollar Tree at dollar stores. They'll have them like 4 packs for $1. So you got this pack of seeds is $0.25. So one of the big advantages of these is it's really cheap. So you don't need grow lights. You don't need the trays. You don't need to water them ever. It's pretty much, I mean, if it gets really, really dry, like in the early spring, which it almost never does here, then you might have to go and spray them with the hose just to get enough water in there so they're not dried out. You can look at them and tell. In the winter, they'll freeze. They'll look dry, but they are just frozen. So you don't want to water in the winter like that. So generally, you don't got to water, and also your investment is a bag of potting soil and your seeds and the duct tape, and that's about it. The jugs are free, and the seeds are relatively cheap, so you can put together quite a bit of plants. Like if you go let's say you go buy a tray of marigolds, it costs you $10, $12, $15, and this costs you 25 cents. So you're much better off. So.
So when do you start opening them up?
You'll see those once they start getting to the plants are different, of course, different sizes. But like a tomato plant, you can leave the thing closed until it's starting to come out of the top of the jug, So then you can open them up and let them go. Other plants are real short, like thyme or something. They're only going to get like an inch tall anyhow, so you can do that. You kind of watch the weather forecast so you don't get you don't have frost coming. But if it's warm sunny day, like in the 50s, you can open them up once they sprouted. Until they sprout, you leave it closed because you never know. There's no point in it.
So you would put how many tomato plants in a gallon jug?
In a gallon jug, I'll put maybe 10 seeds.
10.
You don't want to overdo it.
Right.
The only thing you do want to overdo it on is like onions and shallots and stuff. I'll tip about that is that onions and shallots, if you have old seed, your germination rate will be pitiful. So if it's more than a year old, you'll get like 10%. So dump the whole pack in, and you'll get 10, 15 good ones. Everything else won't grow. If you got regular new fresh seed, then you're going to sprinkle them around, and they'll come up and no problem. Just kind of cast them in there. You don't really want to go too heavy with the seeds because they will sprout. I mean, they're going to come up, and you're going to have, you might have 37 petunia plants in one jug, and that's probably too many. So I'll put maybe a dozen, 18 petunia seeds in a gallon jug, and that's plenty. So, and some will fail. I mean, that's the thing is you're going to get. So you out of 80 jugs, you might get 7 or 8 that don't grow. They just don't. Something happened. They either came up and then they got too cold and they died, or they never germinated. The seeds were too old, or they got soaked too long, and they'll fail. But for the most part, they'll come up, and you'll have plenty of plants for your spring growing.
Thank you.
All right. I think I covered most of it.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for
Very
sharing.
informative.